From Flourish DX, this is the Psych, Health and Safety Canada podcast, with workplace mental health becoming a priority for businesses who want to retain staff and prevent burnout. This is the source of information for creating sustainable and psychologically healthy workplaces in Canada.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Psych, Health and Safety Canada. I'm Kim MacDonald. I'm your host, and today my guest is Corilee Fox. She is a mindfulness coach, and we're going to dive into that area with her. I'm very excited to have this conversation. We have a lot of conversations as psych and health and safety practitioners about the differences between mental health strategies, psychological safety strategies in the workplace, and psychological health and safety management. And so the conversation around mindfulness and the growth in that area is one that I'm really looking forward to and sharing and helping our listeners learn more about it and what is its purpose in the workplace. So welcome, Corilee.
Thanks for having me, Kim. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks. So my first question to you is for our listeners to share a little bit about yourself and your background and your professional journey that brought you to this area.
All right. Sure. I started out in high tech right out of university and worked across the country, worked in high tech for 30 years. And like many industries, it's very intense. It can be a very intense workplace. And I noticed the impact that stress was having on my body. And so I slowed down enough to, I'm a very type A person. I slowed down enough to take yoga. And just became completely sold on the benefits for my mind, body, spirit, and got into mindfulness and meditation and breath work. I started teaching it corporately, started teaching classes as a side gig in my own yoga studio, and was just blown away by how much more at ease I felt and how much more balanced I felt, and really saw it in my students too. And so I'm now working as a coach, and I do training in group settings, coaching people around their personal and business lives. And I also love sharing what I've learned on TikTok and Instagram. I'm really all about the self-healing journey. So where are the places we get stuck or blocked or out of alignment, and how can we get clarity around those areas and work with them so that we can live more authentic lives? And I also work intuitively with clients, so really teaching them to move past just, talking and, being busy in our heads into what's the wisdom I can access in my body.
Very cool. Yes, I have some background with technology businesses as well. And that the way you described them is certainly true then, and it's still true today, I'm sure. As you know, this podcast is all about psychological health and safety and the conditions that support mental health at work. So what does psychological health and safety mean to you?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I've worked in all kinds of environments, and the toxic ones are definitely the most challenging. I worked with an organization, and our team was based in the Midwest in the US, and people in that organization were scared all the time. The leader of the group was very authoritarian. People were defensive. They didn't want to point out any problems. They wanted to blame others. They couldn't seem to take personal initiative. And I could see firsthand that really affected both our productivity and the quality of our products, because everyone kind of kept their head down. And so, to me, a healthy psychological health and safety oriented workplace is one where people feel safe, comfortable enough, and secure and confident enough that they can take initiative and find solutions to problems and get the work done.
All right. With all the intention and conversation about mental health, when you talk to organizations, what are their biggest concerns?
Well, often the kind of umbrella buzzword that they use is stress. And, often it's about the causes of stress, people having issues getting the work done, or having to spend their time and energy on things that are beyond the work, maybe, dealing with that toxic personality or the manager that's tough to work with, or there's unclear goals, or there's muddy communications. And then there's also all the effects of what falls under stress. So the burnout, the absenteeism, because people are mentally and physically unwell. And so mindfulness can really help because it's been shown in the research to decrease stress, anxiety, depression, and also improve performance, focus, memory, and creativity. And so it can be very helpful for workplaces to bring that into the group.
If maybe for our listeners, you can define what mindfulness is and maybe what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of it as tools and techniques and practices that are mostly individually based, although obviously people can, meditate in groups. But for the workplace, it's really key from an individual point of view. So, how I think of it as what the tools and techniques are doing are really beefing up witness or observer part of ourselves. So the part of ourselves that can see what our thoughts, feelings, and emotions are, it's like it creates a little bit of space. So, for example, if my coworker makes an offhand comment and I get triggered, I go into react mode. Instead of being completely lost in it or messed up for the rest of the workday in anger or whatever that reactivity looks like, can there be a part of me going, what's really going on here? What do I need right now? Or question it. Maybe, is my reaction coming from a belief that this coworker is out to get me or whatever it might be? And then I can ask myself things like, is it really true? Am I coming from a fear place? Is that where I want to be operating out of? Or is there an opportunity in this? Is there something I can learn from this? Or is there something I need? Maybe today I forgot to have lunch. It could be as simple as that. And then what are the tools and techniques that I can use to bring myself down from that stress response and bring myself back down to earth so that I can get back into a balanced state of mind?
Well, from the research, we know that leadership can be a psychosocial risk factor. And so from your description of mindfulness, which is about personal practices, what can it specifically offer to leaders in terms of their own leadership and their own abilities? What are the things that they learn through it?
Right. Well, absolutely their own personal orientation in the organization, being clear, their own reactivity or their own responses to things. But also, it can be really key for managers in working with the group. How can we improve collaboration and communication? How can I recognize what's going on for the folks on my team so that if someone is getting deep into a stress response or having a reaction, how can I talk to them? How can I help them feel understood and heard? What can I do to increase flexibility and empathy? All those kinds of things that we owe to mindfulness really help with task commitment and workplace engagement.
Are there specific behaviors that, if you're practicing a particular technique or practices, do you attach them to, a practice of a new habit in a behavior that a leader might employ, or is it more sort of situational in and of the moment?
Um, all of the above. And I think what we're really looking to achieve here, Kim, is, the meta goal is really to shift the whole culture. How can we have the same way of looking at stressors, and where can we bring in the language around mindfulness concepts so that these things become normalized and I can support myself better and I can support my coworkers better? Maybe we're better at noticing when someone is struggling and we're able to connect with them, and help them feel seen and heard, or just spend some time with them. These are all things that can really help an organization and help that feeling of safety.
I read I think it was a study out of the UK, and it was around that our supervisors and our managers have more of an influence on our mental health than our doctors or our therapists or our partners or life partners. And so that influence is hugely important. And have you seen a difference, or are there still stigma barriers or, around this kind of a practice? And where are, I guess, some of the, as I think about different kinds of industries, I think of different organizations, integrating this as part of their leadership development process. And I also see potentially where, there may be some resistance to that. And I'm just wondering, as you in your own experience, where some of that resistance or sort of misunderstandings that people may have about what it is and what it isn't show up.
Yes, and understanding what it is and isn't is definitely key. I've been brought into a range of organizations, everything from factories to, the kind of high tech organizations that I worked in. And so it doesn't seem to be around an industry. But I've often been brought in by organizations where someone has experienced mindfulness or practiced it or learned something about it. And so they understand the impact it's made in their personal life and want to share that with the organization.
For participants in the rooms, in the classroom, can you describe a typical experience that someone might have in like a mindfulness class?
Mm-hmm.
Just for those who haven't ever experienced it or haven't sort of gone down that path yet.
Right. Well, I am a super practical person, and so I'm always going to walk them through different tools and techniques, and I encourage them always to test drive them themselves because each of our experience is different. The breath work technique that I absolutely love that can bring me from 100 miles an hour to back to balance in a minute and a half may not work for you, but maybe there's something else that really works for you. So I always walk people through, real life tools that they can use. But the biggest thing that I find people get out of the mindfulness training that I do is that we look at the nervous system and how it can get dysregulated. And to me, this is such a huge part of understanding. It's almost like the owner's manual for our bodies, right? What happens when I go into stress mode? What happens when I go into fight, flight, freeze? And how is that so not helpful to how I want to be in the organization, right? Because we know that when we're in fight, flight, plenty of systems and processes and ways that we normally operate in the world just don't happen because our body is designed to run really fast away from a saber-toothed tiger. And that's just not happening in the workplace. And so it's almost like our stress response is a little overkill. So one of the best things we can do is understand how it impacts us, where we go when we're stressed, how we can expand our window of tolerance so that we can deal with tougher situations, how we can be clear about things like our negativity bias, because our system is always looking for what's dangerous, what's about to jump out from behind a bush and eat us. And then how we're operating from a mindset point of view. Am I coming from a growth mindset? Am I open and curious? Or am I defensive and closed because I'm in a stress response? And how can I come at the situation from the observer witness point of view so that I'm seeing all the angles and I'm in a problem solving creative mode rather than, oh, I know what's going on here and snap judgments, make quick assessments and, not be coming at it from a beginner's mind.
I love that. What you've named are some meta skills, which are those skills that help us learn things faster and also create more psychological flexibility for us. So the observation skills, which I really love, are fundamental to new competencies for leaders as they explore. And we're not all very good at it,
Right. And I even just love the mindfulness principles. And, some of them are so counterintuitive to how we operate in the corporate workplace, like the beginner's mind. Our mind wants to take the shortest route between where I'm sitting and making assumptions about what's going on. But of course, that doesn't help. There can be lots of nuances. Maybe I really need to understand the context here. Maybe I've walked in the middle of a conversation and I'm going to make a snap assumption. That's not going to serve me, right? Or another one I love to talk about because people go, wait a second, is one of the mindfulness principles is letting go of striving. And we think about, in our culture, it's got to give 110%. But you think about, if you're a manager in an organization and you're pushing, are you making the best decisions? Are you seeing the situation creatively? Are you potentially pushing people too hard? And maybe, there would be some advantages to scaling back just a little bit so that we're working hard, but we're not working crazy. So yeah, even just the mindfulness principles are a good reminder to do things like, let go and accept and let go of judgment. That serves us all in the workplace.
Acceptance, I think it's interesting. Maybe you can go into that a little bit, because for some, there may be, and I'm just the devil's advocate, which is the difference between complacency and acceptance, and that sort of that, and striving, I guess, in the middle there. But it doesn't mean complacency. It's a different kind. Acceptance is a different thing. And maybe describe that from your perspective, what that feels and looks like.
Yeah, for sure. Well, from my point of view, acceptance isn't complacent. It's actually hard work, right? It's hard work to say, yes, this is the challenge that I have, or this is a pattern I fall into, or this is a belief that, comes up for me. And so, but I believe that it's only by allowing those things and accepting them before we can change them. If I'm in resistance mode, it's almost like I'm holding that thing in place that I desperately want to change. Whereas when I accept it, then I can see it for what it is. I can see it in a more big picture way. I can get creative about it. I can try some things. I can talk about it in a more normalized way. I'm not suppressing and hiding and pushing it away. So, acceptance, I think, is really key to making any kind of change.
What do you think is the most important piece of or aspect of mindfulness for organizations if they're looking at training and development for their leaders?
Yeah, I mentioned the nervous system regulation, which I think is really key. And then I think the practices are the subset of that. Now that I know how my system works, what can I do about it? So I teach people things like a quick body scan to see what's going on, or how we can anchor into our bodies so that when someone makes a comment that I'm going to react to, how can I stay in my body so I'm not going into react mode and then saying something I'm going to regret and have to apologize for later? What are some breathing techniques? What are some grounding techniques? Also, how can we be aware of things like our cycle of thoughts, beliefs, feelings, and actions? And how can I be aware of that when I'm working with people and managing people? Sometimes our thoughts and beliefs can send us down a path we don't necessarily want to go down. So how can I bring that back and be aware of what's going on? And also, I really like the how to get out of the stress cycle tips from the book, The Secret to Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. They talk about things like, when you're in stress mode, and you come home from work and you want to make sure that you're going to have a relaxing evening and get a good sleep. So what are some of the things you can do? How can you work that adrenaline and cortisol back out of your body so that it's not impacting your mental and physical health? So do some physical activity, do some breathing, have a good laugh, maybe have a good cry. As long as it only lasts a few minutes, you're not retelling the story, you're just getting the emotion out. All of these are really excellent ways to get out of the stress response and into balance.
Hi listeners, Jason here. We hope you're enjoying this latest podcast episode. Now, if you're like Joelle, Alicia and myself and enjoy learning from the best, then the Flourish DX Academy is for you. The Academy includes free e-learning courses on the ISO 45003 standard for psychological health and safety at work, and associated topics such as how to conduct a psychosocial risk assessment and how to create the business case for psych health and safety. All courses feature high-quality videos, downloadable resources, multi-choice questions, and a downloadable training certificate on completion. Take your learning to the next level with all Flourish DX Academy courses included within the Flourish DX mobile app. Select podcast episodes from the Psych Health and Safety podcast and sister podcasts from Canada and the USA are also included. Get started with FlourishDX for free at www.flourishdx.com/get-started. That's www.flourishdx.com/get-started. Now back to this episode.
It's those shifting strategies that, can be most helpful. Well, for our listeners, and this is also for me, obviously, do you want to do, and then our listeners can actually do it with you? Like, do you have a practice that you want to throw in and take us through? And maybe they can do it along with you just for a couple of minutes to get a sense of it.
Yeah, I like it. All right, let's do some grounding. So hopefully you're sitting in a chair, or I guess you could be lying on a bed, but if you're sitting in a chair, let's bring feet flat to the floor and close your eyes. And let's start by taking some deep breaths. And just imagine yourself exhaling out anything you don't need. So the thing you were just anxious about 5 minutes ago, or maybe the tension in your jaw. And while you're breathing, relax your shoulders, let your belly soften, let your arms just hang heavy in your lap or wherever they're situated. And then notice if there's anything else going on in your body. Notice if there's any sensation. Maybe you've got some emotion happening in your throat or your chest or your belly. Maybe you've got some tension there or some intense feelings, and that's okay. Just keep breathing. And just notice what those feelings are or emotions are like, and allow them to be, and just see if they've got maybe a color or a texture, a feeling. And then maybe you might want to ask them what information they have for you. Is there anything those feelings or emotions might want to tell you? And then if you got something, thank them. Often our feelings and emotions just want to be heard or seen, just like we do. And so when you do that and you just allow them to be and listen to any messages they have, they'll just flow and they'll go. All right, let's take one more breath and feel the soles of your feet sink more deeply into the floor. So just really grounding ourselves into the floor. You can even imagine that roots are going down from the soles of your feet deep, deep into the earth, and just really feel grounded like a big old tree. All right, and then notice if anything shifted from when we started a couple of minutes ago to now. Notice if anything feels different. And just take it in. No judgment is required here. All right, and then when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back.
Corilee, that was amazing. It was. I was in there. I was totally in. So hopefully I invite our listeners to, go back a couple of minutes and do it together with us. If you've only listened to it this time, please participate. And if you're all alone and doing it, that's great. If you're in wherever you are and listening, I encourage you to do it because it really does make a difference. That question about the, accepting the emotions, I did love that one. And thanking emotions. That's a really moving thing to do.
It is. Yeah. I mean, we've never been taught how to manage our emotions, and we do need to manage them because often our defaults are either suppressing and ignoring them, which we know doesn't work because then they spill out and we end up saying something we regret or reacting in some way we regret, or we get completely overwhelmed by them. Mm-hmm. So just allowing them to be, noticing them, naming them, allowing them, checking in on whether there's any guidance that they have, and just keeping breathing through them is a great way to allow them to help us out but not get completely swamped by them.
I see also the link with emotional intelligence, for mindfulness training,
Absolutely.
and the, pretty strong link to emotional literacy and awareness and all of those associated sort of skills and competencies are all sort of embodied in that. So thank you for that. And thank you for jumping in with me on it, which is a surprise that I did that. How have been the results? So working with organizations and their leaders, have you gotten feedback on, people taking it forward and using it in, on a daily basis or practice or seeing the results, sort of the circle?
Yes, absolutely. And it's quite a range of results. And this kind of comes back to what I said about people need to test drive the tools and techniques and find out what works for them. Because when people will come back for a second session or fill in a survey, the results can be anything from, I found that after dinner dog walk with my girlfriend where we could reflect on our day has made such a difference in my life. Now I sleep better, and so I'm more refreshed when I come back to work. I'm better able to cope with challenging situations. Or someone really understanding what their thought patterns are. I'm someone who goes to overgeneralizing, this is always or never true, or, stewing on negative thoughts, and understanding that this is my pattern. Anytime I can notice it and I can say, okay, is this really what I want to be doing? How can I distract myself? Or how can I remind myself of what's really true? And these are things that can make a huge difference for people. But yes, it's always very individual.
I think we can safely say that the early adopters and those who did mindfulness or meditation, and now sort of the mainstream moving to better understanding about it and how it can be helpful. The some of the science behind it. I know that you're, not a physician or a scientist, but you have a really great deal of knowledge about the nervous system, and I remember seeing a image of some imagery of a brain on before mindfulness and after mindfulness, and that chronic stress can actually put us into, if we're in state of dysregulation chronically from the workplace, that over time that's going to have all kinds of physical and mental health impacts. And the image was that brains can shrink and grow in different ways, and neither one of them is positive.
Right.
And for anyone who values their brain and wants to keep it, and doesn't want to have it shrink, that to me was one of the most interesting things about that. And that mindfulness actually shifts it, and you can actually, that our brains do have some ability to shift back positively. Anyway, I'd seen that and read a little bit about that. And I thought, I'm wondering for you if you've sort of experienced or learned any of those kinds of things, and how that might have influenced some of your work.
The brain science is amazing. So the amygdala, if I can say it, is the really old part of our brain that does have all those control over our flight, fight, freeze system. And so if it's running the show, then we're going to spend a lot of time stressed out. But the prefrontal cortex actually grows when we spend time doing things like mindfulness and meditation. And that's the part of our brain that can look at a situation. Well, I like to use this example. If my amygdala is in control and I turn onto the highway to go to work and it's wall-to-wall traffic, I'll go, that's it. I'm going to be late. I'm going to be fired. I'm going to end up living in a cardboard box under the bridge. But if my prefrontal cortex is in control, I'm going to look at that traffic and go, oh, well, I get to listen to another one of my favorite podcast episodes. And I know that the day will work out, whatever it takes. And so that's completely different way of looking at the situation. But that's the difference that meditation and mindfulness can make on our brains.
Mm. For your own experience, how often do you do it? Like, how do you practice yourself?
I try, even if it's just for a few minutes, I try to at least check in the morning while I'm drinking my coffee, tune into what's going on mentally, physically, and spiritually, and understand, is my head already going 150 miles an hour? What do I need? Or am I feeling more balanced and calm? And do that check-in, that body scan. And I find it makes a big difference, because if I can nip it in the bud, with ways to relax myself or ways to come down and bring myself back into balance, then that has impact for the rest of my day.
Mm. For leaders and their behaviors, when you look at the psychosocial factors, things like respect and civility and the risk factors, and psychological support, being clear and with employees about expectations. And you can go through the 13 factors or look at the ISO standard. The way that psychological health and safety can show up is through behaviors. Obviously from a risk management perspective, you're looking at it from a whole management control point of view, but also it sits with leaders and just in their daily behaviors that are either going to support or erode trust and safety in the workplace. How can mindfulness sort of attach to or the training in mindfulness attach to some of those more positive outcomes that you want in a workplace, or positive behaviors that leaders can demonstrate?
Mm-hmm. Well, to me, so many of the leadership qualities can come from beliefs. If you see someone, I don't know, checking their phone too many times during the day, do you immediately assume that they're, I don't know, gambling or playing a game or something? Or are you able to come at it with a more open or curious or compassionate point of view? That maybe they have a sick kid in the hospital and maybe you don't know. And so I think checking those beliefs can make a huge difference, as well as using leaders using the tools and techniques to keep themselves calm, because the employees are looking to them. They're looking to them for reading the situation, understanding whether this is a safe environment, whether I need to be, going to look for another job, or whether, things are okay. And so them regulating their own nervous system is also very important.
Mm. When you think about mindfulness from a leader training perspective, what are the other, if you were thinking about a suite of things to help support some of these new competencies, does mindfulness attach well with certain other kinds of training in the workplace?
Other kinds of training.
Just thinking of, if organizations are looking at their leader training, and this is a piece of both individual mental wellness and self-regulation and that personal growth. I'm just wondering, as independent and separate, and is a great piece of the leadership training, program. But I'm just wondering if there's a nice fit of this with other things that are naturally a piece of leader training in organizations. And yes, I have an answer. I have the answer.
You tell me.
I know, it's funny. Well, no, I was just thinking about in supervisory training programs where, if you look and think about the sort of more traditional based leadership training for supervisors, someone who's now a brand new supervisor, it would be very, I think, progressive and aligned with, a health-oriented leadership to incorporate mindfulness and other skills and competencies within that leadership training if you are becoming a supervisor. So I'm just thinking about observation, curiosity, that mindfulness and self-awareness is sort of embedded in together. But those kinds of skills and competencies aren't always in, those sort of set inside organizations programs. But there's a lot of, I think, research and science around expanding that view of what supervisor training looks like and what is the highest and best time and effort and skills and new competencies. And emotional intelligence sort of threads through all of that kind of thing, and transformational leadership, skills. But I think these are definitely sort of on the newer piece. It's a newer piece of workplace training. And so I'm just trying to think of how that might naturally fold together. And if I think about psychologically healthy and safe workplaces, if organizations would present mindfulness as a part of that supervisory suite of learned skills and understanding, and then that would be from a I think a best practice and best fit to purpose, that how that new supervisor understands their job and role and how they show up and how they are supportive and don't make assumptions, don't go up that ladder of inference and sit in judgment. So all the things that you shared, I just see as sort of coming together in, a little bit of a different makeup for supervisors, new supervisor training, and the attention to that versus maybe some of the other more traditional things that we look at. Not that the other ones are not as important, but today we know that employees and their expectations as they show up for work, it's a whole different relationship with workplace and the expectations for their managers. And this certainly lines up with those in terms of emotional intelligence. So that's my pitch for all new supervisor training
I like
across
that.
Canada, and to have a piece of this mindfulness, self-awareness, and embodied awareness. So that mind-body awareness, because showing up, we always think that it's our technical skills and our cognitive function that shows up, and we have, we have not done ourselves any favors by separating or privileging certain things over another, because we're in a pretty difficult state right now. So that's my pitch for supervisory training all over the world, to have mindfulness and other embodied awareness training as part of their leadership new supervisor training package. So that's it. That's it for that. Thank you so much for what you shared. Do you have any final tips for, besides my advice that I just gave to every HR person across Canada? Any advice for, workplaces and how they can be thinking about things, or advice on, what this might offer them? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think mindfulness is one of those things that, even though it is much of a individual practice, it can also be something that the organization can benefit from the awareness, so that we're talking about the same things, or we know that it's time to take a break, or we know that, someone might be struggling and needs some support. And then it can also help shift the culture. And so those mindfulness techniques, tools, languaging, awareness is all going to help the organization feel more psychologically safe and healthy. And so I think the two go hand in hand.
Thanks so much for that. If people want to reach out to you, how can they connect with you?
I'm on Instagram and TikTok. Instagram is _up_and_to_the_right_. TikTok is Corilee up_and_to_the_right. And my website is upandtotheright.ca. And so all my contact information is there, and my booking link, and I would love to connect with people.
Thanks. And thanks for joining me and having this conversation. It's been great. And thank you so much for the mindfulness practice. That's going to set up my day really, really well.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, I can use it, all the stress reduction that I can, given my brain.
Can't we all?
Yeah, that's right. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And while you're here, I hope you check out other episodes for the podcast and share with colleagues and friends and your network. And also, if you have ideas on topics, subjects, people across Canada I can talk to, I'm always interested in meeting new people and expanding that network and having new ideas that can come to the table to help support education and application of psychological health and safety in the workplace, and all the things that can positively impact mental health at work. And until next time, thanks for your time and your attention.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Canada podcast. To stay up to date with the best content on workplace mental health in North America, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and join the Flourish DX community at www.flourishdx.com.